A very good afternoon to everyone. Today we will be talking in terms of Unit 2. Last session we had gone through Unit 1, that is the nature and scope of international marketing. Today we'll be focusing on environmental analysis. At the very outset, I would like you to have a quick look at the objectives and the structure of today's session so you know how we are progressing in the class. So let's start first with the introduction and what is this topic all about. So when we are talking in terms of environmental analysis, two things that we need to look into. The first one is the degree of foreign company success to a large extent depends on the surrounding marketing environment. And the number two point is the second point is the ability of business firms to respond effectively. So it is not only dependent on the surrounding marketing environment, but it is also dependent on the ability of business firms to respond effectively to the environment. So this is what is important for us to understand. And we talk in terms of environment, we need to understand that everything related to an environment are not within the control of the company. Some are controllable and others are uncontrollable. So it is the environment that determines favorable or unfavorable conditions and hence provides either opportunities or threats and challenges. So we know that opportunities and threats and challenges are at two ends of the spectrum. So, however, there can always be a middle ground where there are opportunities, there are also threats and some challenges in going international. So, what are these factors that affect the environment? And what are these uncontrollable and controllable factors? Let's look at them in a little more detail. So, international marketing environment covers all the relevant global forces influencing international marketing decisions. So, these forces may be internal, that is, internal to the company, such as resource ability and management attitudes. They may be domestic, that is, within the local government where the organization is established. What is the government policy towards international business and facilities? In the last session, we spoke of LPG and how it opened up the market for India. So we'll be talking about those in a little more detail as we go forward in the next few sessions. The third aspect that we need to look at in terms of not only internal and domestic is global. So, what is the international business environment looking at? What is the relevant aspects that we need to consider? Because if you want to be truly international and be successful at what we are doing, we need to understand that marketers attain a thorough understanding of these factors because they impact the international business environment. So, as we move forward, let us try to understand the meaning of international marketing environment. The first one, let us look at the definition. It says environmental analysis is defined as the process by which strategists monitor the economic, government or legal, market or competitor, supplier or technology, geographic, and social settings to determine opportunities and threats to their firms. What we need to understand is this is not a one dimensional analysis. When we talk about environmental analysis, we are talking of micro and macro environment. Micro within the organization's control and internal, and macro, which is outside the organization's control, the uncontrollable factors, which equally, if not more, affect an organization's opportunity to go truly international. So here we are talking about economic, government or legal, market or competitive, supply or technological, geographic, and social settings, because all these factors play a role in the organization's performance in a global market. So when we are talking in terms of internal and external factors, we need to understand that there is A marketing mix which is applied not just to the domestic market but also in the international environment. So here, international marketing environment for any marketer consists of, again to reiterate, A, internal, B, domestic, and C, global marketing forces that affect the international marketing mix. So every business operating in international markets has to analyze these factors in order to take relevant international marketing decisions. The important environmental factors that we need to consider are: one, demographic environment; two, economic environment; three, social and cultural environment; fourth, political and legal environment; fifth, technological environment; and sixth, regulatory or government factors that come into play. So let's first look at demographic environment. So when you're talking about demographic environment, which is one of the six major environments that affects a business operation internationally, demographic environment of a country explains the pattern of population and other changes in the societies, cities, regions, and nations. So, what is this pattern of population? What type of population is there? What kind of age factors, the gender? What is the split? What is the socio-economic status? All these factors are important when you consider in terms of a demographic environment. So, it can be explained on the basis of age classification, sex or gender classification, educational level, marital status, size of family, household patterns, that is, their expenses, their investments, how they purchase, things like that, religion based classification, nationality, etc. So the analysis of demographic environment is useful for market segmentation. Now, only when we know what kind of audience we are reaching out to, what kind of consumers we are reaching out to, and we are able to club them, classify them, or group them into significant markets based on their demographic factors, which we also call as market segmentation, then we are in a better position to take marketing decisions and formulate marketing strategies. So the world population, as we know, is growing at an alarming rate. And according to one report, it is about 76% of world population who are residing in the less developed regions of the world. That is why today the markets are no more concentrated in the so-called developed countries, but it is very clearly and very in a very fast-paced manner moving to focus on the less developed regions of the world. The growth rate of population is nearly 2% in these regions. So that is also an important point to consider. Whereas the growth rate of population is about 0.6% in the developed nations like say Japan, etc. So unless or until the growth rate of population or the entire population structure is not backed with the purchasing power, it will be meaningless. Why we need to focus on purchasing power? If we are able to take our products internationally but there are no buyers, not because they are not interested but they do not have the economic means or the financial ability to purchase our products, then the whole exercise of going global becomes a wasted exercise. So that is why we are talking about purchasing power. So it is not enough to say that the less developed countries have a larger market because of the size of population. We also need to club it with the purchasing power. Do they have the ability to purchase our products? So Mexico is a country with a very young population in the world. India is also having a great chunk, almost 70% of the population who are in the younger age bracket or youth. Whereas on the Japan, if we see as a country, has one of the oldest populations among the world. So if you're looking at Mexico on one hand and Japan on the other, would your marketing strategy remain the same for both? No, for two reasons. One is Japan is a developed country, whereas Mexico is a developing country. Mexico has a large chunk of young population, whereas Japan has one of the oldest population in the world. So the kind of products that we need to sell, the kind of packaging, the kind of content within the products, everything has to change. The pricing, the branding, the kind of influencers, the kind of ads we are creating. So the to sum up, the entire marketing mix will change based on which market we are focusing on. So, consumer behavior also tends to be influenced by educational level, and hence, marketing strategy for a product or market is to be decided by keeping in mind the educational level of that particular society and nation also. And we talked about purchasing power, that is the ability to purchase. We also need to look at the buying patterns. A simple example is, where do they buy? Do they buy in pop and mom stores or small kirana stores? Do they go to supermarkets? Do they go to malls? Where do they purchase? How frequently they purchase? Do they purchase every week? Do they purchase only one item at a time, or do they purchase multiple items at a time? So all these are part of the buying pattern. Then let's look at the economic environment, which is also the second factor which affects the business environment for a company to go international. So, economic environment can be studied in two ways. One is from a macro point of view, and second is from a micro point of view. So, the macro view of economic environment deals with needs and requirements of the consumer and economic policy of a country. The economic policy of a nation also establishes the scope of market and economic outlook of a business firm. However, if you are looking at a micro environment, it focuses on a firm's ability to compete in a market. So it is become internal, right? When we talk about a micro environment, does the company have the ability? Now their environment externally is conducive for you to enter into the market. But do you have the ability to sustain in that market? To enter into the market is not enough, isn't it? Entering into a market has to be backed by the ability to sustain over a period in time. So that is what we are looking at. So the economic environment of a country defines the marketing opportunities and influences international marketing. So when we talk about economic advancement of a country, it can be characterized in terms of high gross national product and income, high per capita income and consumption levels, lower population growth rate, lower cost per unit, substantial amount of capital investment, advanced transportation and communication facilities. So income levels also need to be taken into account. While we are considering all these parameters, which are based on the overall nation's performance, we also need to understand at an individual level what are the kind of income and levels. Do they have the purchasing power? How is the market performing? Will the companies be able to adapt their marketing concepts accordingly or not? So, marketers also need to consider consumption pattern, which allows them to identify the proportion of income that consumers spend on necessities, including food and rent, or consequently, the proportion that is left to spend on less important areas of consumption, such as household goods and leisure. For example, when you're talking in terms of consumption pattern, let us say milk. Now, if suppose someone were to purchase milk, um, do they consume 1 liter per day, half liter per day? Do they consume multiple liters per day? That is one aspect. Now, the question may arise, now, even if I were to export my milk in its packet form, it will not work. Yes, true. But maybe your company is one of those which manufactures milk in terms of a powder, and it is able to market its products beyond the national shores because of a powder form, which is not only sustainable but it also has a longer shelf life. In that case, you want to know, do they are is that market ready for this kind of a product, or are they used to only that local domestic milk packet kind or milk bottle kind of a purchase pattern. So all these affect your decisions as you want to take your market into a newer place. So the economic system or size of economy, economic policies and conditions vary from country to country. There are variations in the levels of income and living standards, internal personal distribution of income, economic organization and occupational structure, and so on. And we also talked about factors that affect economic environment. They are inflation, productivity, shortages of any products, unemployment. They have at the same time a tremendous effect on the price and the income in that particular market. Then let's move to the next aspect, that is the social and cultural environment. The social or cultural environment encompasses the religions, languages, customs, traditions, beliefs, families, tastes, and social institutions. They are all important factors in deciding the business prospects of a firm. So, marketers who want to take their products overseas must be sensitive to foreign cultures. In the last class, we talked in terms of how, for example, KFC tried to, tailor make its products to in the Indian palate, or even McDonald's doesn't sell certain products in India because of the kind of sensibilities or the cultural sensitivity we have towards food and drinks. So these factors also come into play when you're talking about a social and cultural environment. Then, if you are looking at it further, we need to understand that the best way for companies to overcome these social and cultural obstacles is to embrace the local culture. If you were to ask me, I would say this is not the only best way, this is the only way. Because today customers have become very, very discerning and sensitive. And there is a lot of competition available. That means the customers are spoiled for choice. So we need to make sure that our products are catered to their particular socio-cultural environment. And while that is an important factor, we have been talking in terms of other factors also, but this cannot be ignored. I cannot say that the product, even if you're talking in terms of an advertising campaign, the kind of language, the kind of models, the kind of content that is put forth changes from country to country. So, this is what we need to understand, that it has to be as per the local and social and cultural environment. The next one, we are talking in terms of political and legal environment. So, political and legal environment becomes very, very important because companies invest considerable amounts of money in foreign subsidiaries, or even if they're only exporting from their own country, it still requires a very high inventory level, and it requires a very high level of investments in various resources, including raw materials, manpower, etc. The other factor is also the currency. Now, there's a lot of fluctuation in the currency of various countries, and how our currency is on par with the international market. That also affects the amount of profits that our company may enjoy based on the sales that we have made overseas. So the result is that consumers in foreign nations pay higher prices. If they get less satisfactory products and they have fewer jobs, then the end results are not so encouraging for anyone, whether it is the domestic company who is selling the product, or in the long term, the international market which you have entered. Another thing that we need to consider, for example, foreign governments, they can intervene in marketing campaigns at any point in time, and they can do it in many ways. What is possible? What can they do? For example, the contracts for the supply and delivery of goods and services. They can affect the terms and conditions. If I want to enter into a Singapore market from India versus my setting up a subsidiary in Singapore and starting from there, the kind of support and investments that I'll get from the Singapore market will be very, very different because the government has different terms and conditions, not just in terms of my entry, but also in terms of my exit from that market. So you need to be conscious of these parameters. The second one is registration and enforcement of trademarks, brand names, and labeling. Third is patents and copyrights, marketing communication, pricing policies, product safety, acceptability, and environmental issues. For example, products which are packed in plastic. When we talk in terms of plastic, many companies talk about virgin plastic because that is the demand of various governments. Now, or they talk in terms of recyclable plastic, or they talk in terms of biodegradable plastic, or they talk in terms of natural products which are being used to, package various products made of things like jute, cotton, things like that, which not only are sustainable, but they are environmental friendly, and at the same time, they meet the regulations of that particular government in that particular country. So the policies and regulations of the company's home country can also determine its opportunities outside national products, outside national borders also. So the one of the main regulations that we have are embargoes and sanctions. So there are a lot of embargoes and sanctions, particularly in terms of say things like alcohol or cigarettes or BDs or things like pan masala. There are a lot of restrictions. I'm just giving a few examples. Medicines, so there are a lot of do's and don'ts in terms of what you can import and what you can export. So these are highly regulated areas. A number of them are listed. So they have an embargo. They cannot be traded. So these are important factors that we need to consider. Another thing that what happens, and it is a major concern of many companies, is the unstable political regime. For example, we are now seeing the kind of proxy wars and wars that are happening in various, or I would say, it is not exactly wars, but in terms of skirmishes that are happening across various regions. We are seeing in Iran, Iraq, and then we are seeing in Iran, Israel, then we have seen in Russia, Ukraine. So these are just a few examples. I mean, they're not final and binding. It can happen, and at any point in time, it can crop up between any two nations for any number of reasons. But these are just an understanding for us in terms of the unstable political regime. So while countries are involved in these kind of skirmishes, they're not really focused on getting imports or exports. They're just looking at a kind of a survival and being able to get out of that particular situation, if I may put it that way. Businesses are also affected by the legal and political environment of the host company. So marketers first need to determine the level of political risk. That is, how stable is the government? Will the rules and regulations change if a new political government comes in place? Political in the US in a few days from now. We don't know how things will pan out, but definitely these are factors that companies need to consider. Now, whether it's from Republic or Democratic, who is going to come next into power? So, based on that, the kind of policies and regulations may change. And also the equations they have of that political power with the host country, in our case, for example, India. So these things need to be considered in terms of the political risk. The next one is the legal environment. So when you're talking in terms of legal environment, we are talking of it in three dimensions. One is local domestic law, second is international law, and third is domestic laws in the firm's home base. So when you're talking in terms of the firm's home base, for example, there are companies who are setting up their operations in a third country. That means I say I'm from India. My corporate office is in India, but from a point of view of exports to other countries, I may decide to set up a base in another country and export my products directly from there rather than from India. Why so? There are These are based on the restrictions that certain governments may have. They may not have the same policies, or they may not have the same tariff, or they may have certain embargoes. If I were to say export from India, whereas they may have better relations with other countries, so it makes more sense for me to export from a third country and use that as a base to kind of store and supply. So that is why we are talking about three dimensions of law: local domestic law, international law, and domestic laws in the firm's home base. Where do they operate originally from? So businesses also need to be familiar with the laws of the host country and the restraints they place on their operations. Very, very critical. So, while we go further, we also need to understand that businesses are affected by legal environments of country in many ways. So, legal environment is not just based on different laws and regulations. These are also defined by the factors like rule of law, access to legal systems by foreigners, litigations, etc. Variations in legal environment, rule of laws, legal systems, they affect the foreign business firms in a number of areas. The tendencies of governments to change regulations can have also a profound effect on the international strategy, providing both opportunities and threats. Then let's move to the next aspect, that is the technological environment. So, in terms of the technological environment, it is a major driving force. So, if you're talking in terms of international marketing, the impact of technological advances can be seen in all aspects of the marketing process. So, the level of technological development of a nation, it affects the attractiveness of doing business there. Now, if there is more technology involved, it makes it easier, both in terms of my ability to go international, and also in terms of how I am making my product more suitable for that particular environment. There is also the type of operations that are possible. Marketers in developed nations cannot take many technological advances for granted. They may not be available in lesser developed nations. Consider some of the following technological related problems that firms may encounter. For example, foreign workers must be trained to operate unfamiliar equipment. The second one is poor transportation systems, increased production and physical distribution costs. The third factor that we need to consider is maintenance standards vary from one nation to the next. Another important aspect is poor communication facilities. They hinder the advertising through the mass media. And another factor is the data processing facilities. Now, what are these? They make the tasks of planning, implementing, and controlling marketing strategy more difficult. So, technological know how impacts all spheres of an international marketer's operations. It could include production, information systems, marketing, etc. The international markets must understand technological development and its impact on its total operations. So the marketing intelligence system, it helps the international firm. In what way? To know technological orientations of other enterprises and to update its own technologies to remain competitive. So R&D, that is research and development, has a vital role to play in increasing technological ability of a firm. So the level of technological development, it affects the attractiveness. As we said, the more the technology, the easier it is to operate in other countries. And then let us move to the regulatory environment. When we talk of regulatory environment, we have talked about this briefly in the previous chapter. However, this environment encompasses agencies, both governmental and non governmental, that enforce laws or set guidelines for conducting business. Marketing activities are affected by international and regional economic organizations. So, let us see how they are. So, when we talk in terms of the world as a whole, we need to understand that the world is divided into huge trading blocks. And what are these huge trading blocks? One is Europe, second is Central Europe, the USA, Asia Pacific Rim, Africa, and Middle East, with subdivisions within these major blocks. So, chief among the trade blocs or organizations are ASEAN, that is Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Second is EU, that is European Union. Third one is CAEU, that is the Council of Arab Economic Unity. Then we are talking in terms of CARICOM, that is the Caribbean Economic Community. Then CEFTA, that is Central Europe Free Trade Area. It's important for you to understand these various blocks because they become an integral part of your trading internationally. So let's look at Economic Council of Central African States, that is ECCAS, or IMF, that is the International Monetary Fund. Now, IMF, we know, applies worldwide. LAFTA, Latin American Free Trade Association. NAFTA, North American Free Trade Association. World Trade Organization. That is also an important aspect that we need to consider. Now let's look at, just give me a second, please. Yeah. Let us look at World Organization. We said successor to GATT. So the earlier version was GATT, that is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. So one of the more popular, difficult aspects of doing business globally is dealing with vast differences in legal and regulatory environments. Because there is no global legal system, key areas of business law. And what are these key areas? For example, the contract provisions and copyright protection uh, can be treated in different ways in different companies. So here we are talking in terms of companies doing international business. They often, have inconsistent laws, and it could be in terms of the bottle cap, it can be in terms of the bottle, it can be in terms of Italian courts ruling that the labeling was inadequate because most people throw the cap away. So even such small factors, which we consider as small factors, may actually affect the operations. The next one is regarding corrupt practices. So labeling one's country's law into either um, a difficult prohibition or a difficult process vis-a-vis that of international markets, it doesn't really apply because it is not a one dimensional affair here. We're not just talking of the local company. We said it is looking in terms of laws in terms of three factors. One is the home country of the product. Second is the domestic uh, law where you are operating from. And third is the area or the law that is applicable in a third world. So, regarding corrupt practices, one country's law creates many unique challenges for foreign firms operating overseas in the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act in US, which prohibits the distribution of bribes. So this is in terms of the international marketing environment for any marketer. So we talked in terms of what factors? We talked in terms of the demographic environment, the economic environment, the social and cultural environment, the political legal environment, and the technological environment and the regulatory environment. So a company has to analyze these factors in order to take suitable decisions in international marketing. And in addition to that, we also said that demographic environment plays a role in terms of the age, gender, education level, marital status, etc. Then we also talked in terms of what is useful for market segmentation, taking marketing decisions, and formulating marketing strategies. We also looked in terms of the economic environment from 2 points of view. One is the macro point of view, and second is the micro point of view. The next one is the macro view of studying economic environment. It deals with external factors, whereas micro deals more of the company's internal factors. We also said that technology is very, very important for a company to drive its business overseas. At the same time, the company also has to consider factors like political and legal environment. So these are factors that we need to consider. Now, this is unit 2 that we have covered so far. And now let us enter into unit 3. If you have any questions on unit 2, please put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to address them before we move to unit 3, that is entering international markets. So we'll take a moment here and so that you can enter into the chat box any questions that you have. Okay. Uh, so let's go to unit 3, that is entering into international market. So here when you are talking in terms of this, let us look at introduction, basic strategic decisions, market entry strategies, direct exporting, direct investment, licensing and franchising, contract manufacturing, joint ventures, strategic alliances, mergers and acquisitions. These are the factors that we will be talking about when we are talking in terms of entering into international markets. So let us first look in terms of the introduction. So when businesses grow successfully within their domestic markets, they plan to expand their businesses into international markets in an attempt to replicate its success to overseas markets. So here, what are the business firms doing? They are actually opting for different modes of entry into international business. And how are these factors that are affecting their modes of entry? It can be based on the size of the business, it can be on their expansion strategies, the potential size, the demand of chosen international market, the economic and the business environment of the overseas nation, to name a few. So companies intend to undertake international business, they must determine the type of presence they desire. Now, there are different options that are available, and we'll be talking about all of them. But first thing is, I need to determine, as a firm, I need to determine what I need to take into consideration if I want to go internationally. What kind of presence I want? So, one major choice concerns the techniques of market entry. So, a company may want to produce in its home country and export to the overseas market. Now, that is one option we have. Or the second one is where I say, I will prefer to produce overseas and sell it locally. Or there can also be a third option that we spoke about in the previous unit when we said, I'm manufacturing in a third country, which is not either my home country or the export country. So I'm manufacturing in a third country because either the rules and regulations are better there, the embargo is less, it is cheaper manpower, my resources are available locally over there, which makes sense for me to use local resources and manufacture and produce my goods and then market from there. It can be n number of reasoning that we need to consider. At the same time, we also need to understand the kind of ownership. Now, if I were to enter into Singapore market from an Indian perspective and say I want to set up a 100% subsidiary there, it may not be possible to that extent, depending on what the regulations state in that country. So I may have to involve a local party who will also be a partner in my business and who will have a stake. So that can be the policy of that country. So is it 50-50 partnership? Is it a 60-40 partnership? Or is it on a direct partnership? I own everything. Or is it an indirect partnership where I start a subsidiary and the subsidiary is actually doing that business? So all these factors play a role. So these initial decisions on market entry have short term, medium term, and long term implications. So they leave little room for change once a commitment has been made. That is why all these factors need to be considered well in advance. Sometimes, when we talk of international business, we say it's far easier to start your operations overseas. You can start maybe even as quickly as a week's time. However, the kind of decisions that you need to take, the kind of strategies that need to be done, the kind of groundwork that needs to be done goes back a long way. So, what we see is just a tip of the iceberg when we say, okay, I was able to start within a week. But what kind of background work have I done? That may take much longer for this very same reason that it's not a one-time affair that and it's not a short-term affair. So I'm looking at it from a long term. So depending on whether I'm looking at short term, medium term, or long term, the implications of my decisions will change. So the basic strategic decisions that we need to consider are A, the selection of a company's method of entry into overseas market. And what does it depend on? It depends on several factors which are peculiar to the firm and the industry. When we say peculiar to the firm and the industry, for example, the rules and regulations of a pharma company is far different from that of, say, a steel manufacturer. Now, even within a pharma company, for someone who manufactures customer medicines versus someone who manufactures bulk drugs, the rules and regulations will change. So that is why we are saying they are peculiar to the firm and industry. So you cannot say because X has done it, I'm going to replicate it. No, your market may be different, your product may be different, your services may be different, your ideas may be different, and your industry itself may be different. So, what are these factors or what are these variables related to the firm that affects the decision? One is company goals. What kind of volume of the international business are required? What is the expected geographic coverage and the time span of foreign involvement? The second one is in terms of the size of the company, in terms of sales and assets. The third one is the company's um, product line and the nature of its products, industrial or consumer, high or low unit, technological content, competition abroad. So these are all factors that need to be considered. Again, we say beyond the factors peculiar to the company or the firm, there are other decisions that need to be considered. What is that criteria? They relate more generally to the method of entry into foreign markets. So, the three basic strategic decisions that a company should consider before expansion or entry into foreign market are: one, which market to enter. Seems very obvious. Second, when to enter. What is a good time to enter? You cannot enter any good day and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to start from tomorrow. Because when we are talking of when to enter, when we say good day, it depends on multiple factors. Is that nation, how are they doing? What are the economic upturn or downturn that is happening there? What is the political and legal environment right there? Is it conducive for me to enter now? Is it something that I need to wait for certain period before I enter into that particular market? And if I were to enter at all, on what scale should I enter? So each of these decisions is discussed below. Which markets to enter? The choice to enter the international market is based on an assessment of a company's long run profit potential. And this potential is a function of several factors. When we say long run profit potential, because I'm not looking at gaining some immediate gains. I'm looking at my company being able to sustain in that business environment in an international market over a long period in time. So, for that, I need to consider factors like the size of the market. And the size of the market, when we talk about, we also need to understand the terms of demographics and the purchasing power. We have spoken about it previously also. So demographics is all about age, gender, factors like that, and education level, etc. But at the same time, if they do not have the purchasing power, we were talking about, a lot of youth in Mexico. But if they, for example, they do not have the purchasing power to buy the kind of products like luxury goods that we want to sell over there, then there's no point in entering it. Whereas in Japan, though they have an older age group, maybe there is higher preference for high-end luxury dress and apparel. So I may prefer to enter that market, or maybe that market is already saturated. So these are all factors which need to be considered. The second one is the stage of the economic development and political factors. They also have an impact in terms of how attractive the foreign market is. Then the balancing of benefits, costs, risks associated with doing business in those markets. Is there potential for war? Are there some, skirmishes that are happening around the political border? Is the political environment conducive? Is it, a demographic country which is largely populated by youth, or is it senior citizens who are a part of that business? Is the kind of profile of the consumers there more in terms of the education, higher education, or not so well educated, literacy, or technology use? All these factors come into play. Then the balancing of benefits, costs, and risks is involved with doing business, and ranking of these countries in terms of their attractiveness and long run. So in terms of some companies choose to do it periodically. How are these companies, open to attracting business? Are they interested in new companies entering into their market? Even if we see domestically, we there are some states where we say it is open to, more friendly. They have a one window or single window system for doing business, and there are countries where states which are not so supportive of new entrants into that market. Similarly, it is in the case of nations as well. And when to enter. So here we are talking in terms of the first mover advantage. If we enter early, we are the first to enter into that particular business, then we are able to preempt the rivals and capture demand by establishing a strong name there. The second one is in terms of the ability to build sales volume and write down the experience curve ahead of rivals. We are giving the early entrant possible a cost advantage also, so I can determine as the early entrant at what price I want to sell my product. So it may be a higher price or a lower price depending on my internal
ఎక్స్క్యూజ్ మీ మేడం.
strategy. Yes, sir.
మేడం ఇది మీకు హోస్ట్ ఇస్తా మేడం. మీ క్లాస్
Sure.
కాగానే ఎండ్ చేసేసుకోవచ్చు క్లాస్ మీరు.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir.
ఓకే మేడం,
Okay, sir.
కంటిన్యూ
Thank you,
చేయండి.
sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. So these are factors that we need to consider. And is the company able to bear the time and cost of promoting and establishing a product offering and the regulations of the foreign market? And at what scale? Am I trying to do a small pilot project in that particular country, or am I planning to enter big time and then I'm looking at long term sustainability and bigger profits if I'm able to enter in a with a bigger hype or a bigger investment. Let's look at the market entry strategies. One of the critical decisions of international marketing is the mode of entering the foreign market. So at one extreme, a company may decide to produce the product domestically and export it to the foreign market. We talked about this. Or in this case, the company need not make any investment overseas, except that in terms of, say, your product or service, the warehousing, or the kind of the local distribution that you need to set up, in whether you need to have retail outlets or you're actually supplying it to some other company or some other retailer or some other firm who is willing to stock your products or using your products as part of their original product. You're supplying raw materials to them. So all these factors need to be considered. But definitely the kind of investment of you setting up an entire business overseas versus you doing it initially in your own home country and then exporting it, it always works out cheaper. This strategy requires different foreign investments by the company. So in between these two extremes, where I'm either hosting it from my own country and supplying abroad, or I am manufacturing abroad in the same country that I'm selling. So I'm manufacturing, producing, and selling there. There's a big cost difference, but there are also other factors that need to be considered. So here, with all its power, even a large company may have to formulate different entry strategies to different countries. You cannot say I'm the number one player or number two player in my industry or in my area of business. So for me, entry will be easy to any market in the world. It doesn't work in that manner. So there has to be a different entry strategy for one country or one market versus another market, because the same strategy will not work across the world. So the various markets entry strategies are: one is direct exporting, second is direct investment, next is licensing and franchising, contract manufacturing, joint ventures, strategic alliances, mergers and acquisition. Let's look at each of them in a little more detail. So, first is direct exporting. Exporting is the most traditional and attractive mode of entry into the foreign market. So, I am manufacturing locally and then I am doing either indirect exporting or direct exporting. So, what is this direct and indirect exporting? So, indirect exporting involves home based independent middlemen who constitute the domestic subsistence. So what happens is the manufacturer manufactures the product, but it utilizes the services of middlemen or cooperative organizations to take the responsibility of selling the product. So what I'm doing here is I only manufacture a particular product. Let us say I produce or manufacture or weave saris. Now, there my job ends because I'm not looking at directly exporting into the international market. So, what I'm doing is I'm actually using the services of some export merchants, agents, or brokers who are the middlemen. And why am I using them? Because they not only take the responsibility of selling my products overseas, but they may also be familiar with the market there because they have been exporting other or similar products there. So they already have set up a line of business which makes it easier for us to go through them. So the firm determines that I need to go through these middlemen, and that is an indirect exporting process, but it eases my life. I don't need to worry about the documentation. I don't need to worry about finding retailers to sell my products abroad. I don't need to worry about recovery of money or my payments, etc. Because all these are being taken care of by the middlemen. So either they're purchasing my products fully, or we have an understanding where once the product is sold, then we get back our money. So it depends on the kind of agreement we have with the middlemen. However, that is not the only option that is available. The manufacturer may also decide that let me enter into the market directly and sell there directly. I don't want to use any middlemen. I'll sell directly to foreigners, or when we say foreigners, the locals of that particular company. So, exporting is the appropriate strategy when one or more of the following conditions prevail. And what are those conditions? One is volume of foreign business is not large enough to justify production in the foreign market, or cost of production is very high there, or foreign market is characterized by production bottlenecks. It can be in terms of infrastructural problems, it can be in terms of material supplies, it can be in terms of the legal and political environment there. It could be anything. There are also political and other risks. Then the company has no permanent interest in the foreign market concerned, or that there is no guarantee of the market available for a long period. A foreign investment is also not favored by foreigners, or the foreign country concerned. It could also be licensing or contract manufacturing. There's not a better alternative there. So it could be n number of factors that make me decide that I will export my products rather than set up a production unit in that particular country. So although exporting is definitely the best alternative under a given set of conditions, there are factors which affect and make that particular process much more difficult. They could be in terms of the policies of foreign governments which discriminate against imports. There could be some imports, like you said, even within India, where there's a lot of embargo, or certain products are banned both from exports and imports, or substitutes are encouraged because they're more environmental friendly. There could be any number of factors, or there could also be that they prefer local products for certain products to encourage locals from doing their business in a more profitable manner. So exporting through a merchant exporter can confer also certain advantages. The manufacturer can overcome the problems of direct exporting, such as investment of resources in collecting marketing intelligence for setting up of export department. They can receive instant foreign market knowledge. Then we also talk in terms of the operational cost of export house or merchant exporter. This is kind of spread all over because there are several parties involved. So no one party needs to bear the entire cost. So that also makes a difference in terms of the unit cost pricing. Then we talk in terms of the export house, which works on commission basis. There is an incentive for the export house to expand the sales. I get more commission, I would rather make more sales. If I In view of the fact that the export house is affected by consolidated shipments, there is a possibility of reduction in unit freight. Because when we talk in terms of exports, we usually talk about half a container or one container. So, a middleman may have several products which they are able to cohesively include within a single container because they're sourcing materials or products from multiple vendors. So they are able to ship their products in a better manner. So it becomes more cheaper to go through them than for us to book an entire container and use only a part of the container to sell our products abroad. So the reputation of export house will also affect the manufacturer to get a better representation of their products. And what are the disadvantages? Where there are advantages, there are also disadvantages. Some of them are as follows. The export house merchant exporter, in order to earn more commission, may take a two unrelated lines, resulting in the producer getting neither the expertise nor the attention he's looking for. So unrelated lines means the middleman may be, selling products. Export house may be selling products as varied as say toothpaste and clothing. So I may be selling clothing, someone else may be selling toothpaste and exporting to the same market through this middleman. And the middleman is not a specialist in either, or I'm not able to leverage the advantage of the middleman in terms of getting a better name and fame for my product, that is, say, a clothing line, because the other product is, say, a toothpaste, which is totally unconnected. And under this agreement, there is also a possibility that the manufacturer continuously depends on the export house and they do not develop their own export expertise. This is a big challenge that we need to consider. There's also possibility of both the manufacturer and the export house lacking personal involvement in the export business, because either party can drop the other. I may decide to export directly. The middleman may say, hey, you know what, your product is not really selling in the market abroad. So I would rather drop your product and focus on products which have a better sale there. So there is this complex involvement or possibility of both manufacturer and exporter dropping their tie-ups. Or it can also be in terms of the export house pushing the product abroad on its own name and reputation. For example, if you are talking in terms of some of the courtier or some of the big clothing, houses that we see, the fashion labels that we see, they would rather do their exports on their own terms and conditions. And if they go through a middleman, they may lose that, strength of their own label. So they may want to that do a direct sale. Same goes with a middleman. The middleman may be a large export house which has already built a market for itself. So it doesn't want to take on lesser well-known brands, or it doesn't allow the lesser well-known brands to flourish in that particular market. Another form of indirect export is also the consortium approach. That means a limited number of manufacturers of the same product. They join together and then they export on a cooperative basis. We have seen how Amul made it big in India because of this cooperative business process. In the same way, we also know that today Amul is taking its products to foreign shows. It is selling in the US in the same line of work. Or different export houses, say manufacturing shirts, all of them may come together and say, let us form a cooperative and let us all sell together. Very common in terms of handloom products or jute or say honey or forest products. So these are very, very prevalent in terms of the cooperatives forming for exports. Or export orders will be procured on a joint basis and distributed amongst the constituent units. Or here, I am not working on a cooperative basis. in the sense that all the manufacturers are not coming together. Instead, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to procure orders from different retailers. And what I'm trying to do is I'm also trying to contact different vendors and selling my products across to them. The individual units will be permitted to use their own letterhead and brand name. This also happens. It depends on the kind of arrangement you have with the middleman, or the kind of arrangements you have with the consortium, the bargaining power that we call this aspect. Then undercutting is reduced to a great extent, and all the economies of scale associated with joint operation can be reaped. Next, we move to the direct investment. When we talk in terms of direct investment, we refer to a firm investing directly in facilities to produce and market a product if a foreign country allows. So, foreign direct investment, that is FDI, is defined as an internationalization strategy where the firm establishes a physical presence abroad through direct ownership of productive assets. It could be in terms of capital, technology, labor, land, plant, and equipment. FDI activities can also be classified in nature of the ownership. That is, whether it's wholly owned direct investment, whether it's a JV or joint venture, or there is an equity participation. Particularly, we see a lot of it in startups, or in terms of its form, whether it's a greenfield investment, very conducive to the environment, acquisition, and mergers. So, foreign direct investment is critical for developing and emerging countries. So, companies need multinationals. Why do they need multinationals? Because of the funding and expertise that these companies bring to their international sales. And advanced economies such as United Kingdom, Japan, the US have been popular destinations for foreign direct investment, or FDIs, because they have strong GDP per capita. And we all know that the high GDP growth rates and density of knowledge workers in these countries are high. So, reasons why companies consider making direct investment in a foreign market could be in terms of some governments prohibiting or limiting imports of goods produced in other countries. But they are okay if the company sets up a base in their own market and produces locally. We have seen a lot of auto manufacturers entering into Indian markets, initially in terms of exporting it to our nation. But today we see a lot of companies who have actually set up a physical base here, and they are not only manufacturing locally, but they're also selling their products locally. Auto is one great example, whether it's in terms of two wheelers or cars. We know some of the popular brands there. Then the second one is in terms of producing goods in the target market. It avoids import duties and other taxes that may apply. The third one is in terms of the companies obtaining the services of skilled employees in the target market, or gaining intelligence held by people in the market. In certain countries, companies can take advantage of lower costs, such as cheap labor, etc. And companies can also become more competitive. And when we talk in terms of benefits, one is the resource transfer effect. What does this pertain? So here, the host economy is supplying the capital, technology, and management resources that would otherwise not be available, and it boosts that country's economic growth rate. So here we talk in terms of the MNCs, the large size and financial strength, which makes it easier for them to go into certain markets, certain companies, because of the advantage they have in terms of their money power, or investment power. Technology can also stimulate economic development and industrialization. The next one is the employment effects. When we are talking in terms of foreign employee, MNC, it employs a number of host country citizens. We talk about TCS or Cognizant, which have set up base, say, in the US, where a large number of local employees are employed by these countries, or say Google initially entering into India and taking in a lot of Indian employees. Sorry. Then the balance of payment effect. What is this balance of payment? So there are three potential benefits of FDI, or foreign direct investment. One is the MNC establishes a foreign subsidiary. Second, the capital account of the host country benefits from the initial capital inflow. Sorry. Second, if the FDI is a substitute for imports of goods and services, it can improve the current account of the host country's balance of payments. And the third benefit is the host country's balance of payments position arises when the MNC uses a foreign subsidiary. Further, in terms of competition and economic growth, then FDI takes in the form of a greenfield investment. The result is to establish new enterprise, and therefore it means a number of players in a market, and there's a better consumer choice. It also results in increased productivity growth, product and process innovations, and greater economic growth. And what are the advantages of this direct investment to a home country? That is the original country from where the firm has established its business. So, first, the capital account of the home country's balance of payments benefits from the inward flow of foreign earnings. So, we say if we are, for example, Google has entered into Indian market, a lot of the initial funds used to go back to the home country. Things have changed since then, but this is as an example, or vice versa. Countries which establish in India, they send back, or companies which are established outside India, they send back to the home country. The other benefit to the home country arises from employment effects. So there is a lot of export that is happening. That means there is also an involvement of capital equipment, intermediary goods, complementary products. All these also affect, it's not just one single firm or one industry which benefits. There are a lot of ancillaries which are also simultaneously increasing their investments and therefore their employment and profits. The third benefit arises when home country MNCs learn valuable skills and technology from its exposure to foreign markets. Then, what are the limitations of the host country? The host government shall worry that the subsidiaries of foreign MNCs may have greater economic power than indigenous competitors. The host country has fears that MNCs may monopolize the market. And then, due to FDI, the outflow of earnings from a foreign subsidiary goes to its parent company. Again, we also need to understand that a foreign subsidiary imports a substantial number of inputs from abroad. That means it results in a debt on the current account of the host country's balance of payments because money is going as an outflow. Again, the host countries or governments worry that FDI is accompanied by some loss of economic independence. So, certain decisions have to be taken. That is, whether the foreign parent has any commitment to the host country, how much of their earnings should be retained within the host country's government, political, boundaries, etc. There are also limitations in terms of the home country. What are they? The most important concern is in terms of the balance of payments that we have talked about. The second is the employment effects, and where people are being employed locally or outside. The second is in terms of the capital account of the balance of payments because it affects It is affected from the initial capital outflow that is required because I need to invest in another country. So therefore, I need to finance my FDI. And we also see that there is an offset or to the subsequent inflow of foreign earnings. So if my outflow is not balanced by the inflow, then it may affect how my home country is um, considering in terms of the economic impact. The next point that we need to consider is the current account of the balance of payments suffers if the purpose of the foreign investment is to serve the home market from a low cost production location. And finally, the current account of the balance of payments suffers if the FDI is a substitute for direct exports. We'll also talk briefly in terms of licensing and franchising. Franchising is basically a specialized form of licensing in which a parent company, that is a franchisor, grants another independent entity, the franchisee, the right to do business in a prescribed manner under the same brand name. This is very, very important. There's a franchisor who is the original owner of the company. There is an independent entity, which is a franchisee, and they are allowed to do business in a prescribed manner and under the same brand name as the franchisor. Some of the well-known companies that we know are Coca-Cola or Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, McDonald's, etc. The important factor that we need to consider here is what does the franchisor do? The franchisor supplies its products, services, technological know-how, brand name, and trade secrets to the franchise franchisee. Now, franchising arrangements are broadly classified into three types. One is the product franchising. Here, we have seen Singer Corporation in the 1800s. It distributed its sewing machines. This practice also became popular in the petroleum and automobile business. So here, product franchising involves their particular franchisee is able to distribute goods for a manufacturer and in return they get a fee. This is one of the earliest types of franchising. The second one is the manufacturing franchising. So here the franchisor or the manufacturer, they gives the dealer, that is the bottler, the exclusive right to produce and distribute the product in a particular area. Soft drink industry, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, are great examples of this manufacturing franchising. The third one is a business format franchising. Here, what is considered and what is perhaps one of the most popular formats at present, is where there is an arrangement for the franchisor to offer a wide range of services to the franchisee. What all they offer? Marketing, advertising, strategic planning, training, production of operation manuals, standards, quality control guidance. That means, in effect, the franchisor is doing everything possible under the sun to make sure that the franchisee is able to, franchisor is doing everything possible for the franchisee to do their business in a conducive and profitable manner. So this is called as business format franchising. So there are advantages to the franchisor and advantage to the franchisees. Who is the franchisor? The original manufacturer. So they can expand their business without incurring additional costs. They may also take certain investment from the franchisee for setting up and allowing them to do their business under their brand. The customers are assured of quality because they identify that particular product based on the reputation of the brand. It can also be in terms of increasing the goodwill, building the brand name, and reaching out to more customers. So, what is the advantage to the franchisee? A franchisee can use franchising to start a business on a pre-established brand name. It also need not spend too much money on training and assistance. In reality, it may spend most of its money in terms of physical outlet setup or investment in the employees, etc. but not necessarily in terms of training and assistance to the employees because that is done by the franchisor themselves. Another advantage is that sometimes a franchisee may get exclusive rights to sell the franchisor's products within an area. So that's a big plus plus. This often happens in terms of food business. Franchisees will get to know business techniques and trade secrets of brands. And if some of them, though they are constrained in terms of legal practices, may decide to set up operations after a certain incubation period or cooling period in the same line of business. And then what are the disadvantages for franchisors? The most basic disadvantages that franchisee does not possess direct control over the sale of its products. The second one is the same thing in a reverse manner, which is a plus for the franchisee, but a minus for the franchisor is that their trade or business secrets may be not, revealed not only to the franchisee but may also go to the competitors. What is the disadvantage of franchisees? However, when you're talking about trade secrets going to competitors, we also understand there is a certain ethical issue involved there. I just want to clarify that before we move to the disadvantages for franchisees. So, no, first of all, no franchise has complete control over the business because they're just franchisees. So they cannot do business as they please. They have to follow the policies and conditions of the franchisor. Another disadvantage is they have to pay a royalty, obviously, to the franchisor for every business that or sale or transaction they do. And in certain agreements, they may also be giving a royalty fee, irrespective of whether they're doing business or actually making sales. It depends on the kind of agreement they have. And when a franchisee fails to do well, the franchisor could indirectly be affected by it and the reputation may be tarnished. We'll move to the next one, that is a contract manufacturing. Here, contract manufacture is a process that establishes a working agreement between two companies. So here, under the contract manufacturing, a company doing international marketing contracts with firms in foreign countries to manufacture or assemble the products while retaining the responsibility of marketing the products. So I own my product. I do everything about my product, right from the conception to the sale. However, just in terms of actual assembling of the product, I may sublease it to a local manufacturer so that it uh, gives me the advantage of economies of scale or cheaper manpower or cheaper resources and local availability. Some of this happens in the liquor business as well, where companies set up units in a foreign country. They own the brand, they own the bottle, they own everything, but the liquor or alcohol is manufactured locally, and then the company actually bottles it under their own name and sells it in the local market. This also happens in terms of computers. Initially, particularly when we had a lot of desktops, a lot of companies used to manufacture their company products locally, but still sell it under their single brand name. They used to sell it only through their own offices and not through a middleman. Some of the examples that we can consider here are MNCs like Hindustan Levers, Johnson and Johnson, Pond's, Dettol, etc. So contract manufacturing has certain advantages. What are they? They do not have to commit any resources. The company is free from the risk of investing in foreign shows. If idle production capacity is readily available in the foreign country, it can leverage on that. The cost of product obtained by contract manufacturing is lower because I have certain rules and regulations in terms of making my employees produce the same products, either because I'm limited by my own home country laws and regulations or the countries laws and regulations. It's also less risky way to start by utilizing established own production facilities rather than setting up an entire business from scratch in terms of a production unit. The cost is also relatively low. There are also disadvantages. So, what are they? The parent company has to forego the manufacturing profit to the local firm. It's not always easy to locate a local party with the necessary capabilities to manufacture the product. Remember, there are always a lot of rules and regulations that you have. For example, in terms of Coca Cola, if you take, or Pepsi, or any soft drink business, they have regulations in terms of everything, right from the size and shape of the bottle to the thickness of the bottle to the lids. For a long time, the bottles were actually being exported to domestic markets, outside the domestic markets, because the companies had that kind of conditions in terms of which the products could be produced. Another disadvantage is local party gains experience in marketing and over a period in time may become a threat to the parent company. And also in terms of any constraints in terms of the quality of the product or the standards required by the parent firm. And we'll talk about now when we talk in terms of a joint venture, very word joint venture is indicative of the kind of business arrangement. It means two or more independent firms come together to form a legally independent undertaking. Usually, this is for a stipulated period to fulfill a specific purpose, uh, such as accomplishing a task, activity, or project. A good example is that of Maruti Suzuki. When it first formed in India, it was a joint venture between Maruti and Suzuki. Over in a period in time, that partnership got resolved because we also know that it is a temporary partnership established for a definite purpose. So joint ventures are very common within India, but both when we talk in terms of companies being set up within the Indian market or outside the Indian market. And what are the advantages or objectives of this joint venture? One is to enter foreign market. Second is to reduce risk factor for heavy investments. Third is to make optimum utilization of resources. Next is the economies of scale and to achieve synergy. So some of the salient features of joint ventures, first one is an agreement. It can be two or more firms, they come together, they have an agreement to undertake a business for a definite purpose and they are bound by it. They also may have a constraint in terms of the time. Usually they do. Joint control. So they have joint control over the administration and business assets and operation. Next is the pooling of resources and expertise. So some companies may be strong in capital, manpower, technical know-how. Others may have the expertise or the local market presence or branding, which can help in large scale production and marketing. Sharing of profit and loss. So co-ventures, depending on the kind of agreement they have, in a pre-agreed ratio, they may distribute the profits or even losses as they occur. Access to advanced technology. So, by venturing into joint ventures, firms get access to various techniques of production, marketing, and doing business, which decreases the overall cost and also improves quality. And there is also a dissolution that once the agreement comes to an end, the accounts of the co ventures are settled and the company is dissolved. So, some of the advantages are low cost of production, economies of scale, access to technology, and access to new markets and distribution networks. Another factor that we need to consider in terms of advantages, the innovation that can come forth when two different companies with two different strengths come together and start producing new products. So there are new ideas and new technology may be introduced into the product. And of course, the recognition of the brand name. So if a big brand of Europe enters into joint venture of with an Indian company, then it has definitely a synergic advantage. So what are the disadvantages? One is the transfer pricing. What does it mean? Then where there is transfer pricing, it means there is a global strategy that involves substantial cross-border trading. So here there are inevitable problems related to inward and outward transfer pricing and the sourcing of exports. The money is being transferred to the pricing as well. So unequal resources and powers between the two investors or two or more investors who are coming together to form into a single company. There's a clash of cultures that can affect how they integrate together. The same goes with communication. Is there a clear communication between these two businesses in terms of how they need to set up their not only the manufacturing but also the marketing and other sides of the business line as well? Unclear, clear and unrealistic objectives where you're going way out than what the actual market potential is. There can also be issues related to tax invoices. We talk about strategic alliances. Here, companies come together for a set period in time. It's an agreement between two or more independent companies. It can be in terms of manufacturing, development, or sale of products and services. And what is the advantage of goal of strategic alliances? They're able to leverage critical capabilities, increase the flow of innovation, and increase flexibility in responding to market and technological changes. So Tata Tea, when they tied up with Techly, that was a major plus to Tata because they were able to leverage the marketing expertise of Techly to enter the market abroad. We are also seeing a lot of these in terms of the automobile industry. And some of the common reasons for the strategic alliance, one is the slow business cycle. I'm not able to do well in a international business, so I decide to tie up with a certain business firm to help me push either in that particular line of work. It can be in terms of the marketing or entering a new market or in terms of retailing. It could be any of these factors where they may have a strategic alliance. The second, it could be in terms of standard cycle of the business. So here, a company launches a new line of products every few years and at regular intervals, but may or may not be able to maintain its lead as a market leader. So it makes sense for me to tie up with companies who are continuing to do business at a higher end. So it could be an alliance in terms of wanting to gain a higher market share, gain access to complementary resources or economies of scale, etc. There's also a fast cycle of the business. So here, when we're talking about fast cycle of the business, we say companies need to come up with an offer to offer a range of products on a constant and continuous basis to survive in the market. So the advantages of strategic alliance. One is to speed up the entry into a new market. Second is to enhance sales. Third is new skills and new technology, which is being brought in by different partners coming together. The divided level of fixed cost and resources, the innovative products and services, the enhanced distribution channels, easy to get into international market and build the image of the brand. I've not been expanding on these points because we have already covered the same factors under different heads for different companies, but with different advantages and disadvantages. So, are there disadvantages to strategic alliances as well? Yes, definitely. It could be in terms of the poor management of the business or a poor communication, or benefits are unequal. The host company, the major company, may be getting major chunk of business, and the other company who has been brought in as a strategic partner may not be gaining as much. The reverse can happen as well. So we need to understand that. It depends on the kind of agreement they have. The risk to reputation, if your strategic alliance partner is not as strong as you are, it may actually backfire on the firm. So barriers in work culture and language, it is very common in strategic alliances. Then the risk of conflict and the vulnerability in terms of companies constantly staying alert because they don't want to disclose everything to the alliance partner. And then there are also legal issues that need to be considered. Then the mergers and acquisitions. Here, merger itself means two companies which are coming together to form into one company. So in 2017, we have seen that there are some 1,000 major mergers and acquisitions that happen. India has also been a major example of this. Vodafone India and Idea Cellular, we have seen that they're the top two India's wireless carriers. They merged operations Vodafone Group in UK, and in India they got diversified as Aditya Birla Group. Ola, we know, is also an example of a merger acquisition. Ultratech companies are some other examples. So, what are the motives of this merger and acquisition companies? Because the first and foremost thing is synergy. For all these transactions that are happening over different business alliances, we know synergy is a major reason where they're trying to pull in their resources. But when we're talking particularly about mergers and acquisitions, we're talking in terms of operating, financial, or managerial synergy. So operating synergies is where they're actually talking in terms of company sales force or distribution network and coming together. Or it could be in terms of cost reduction benefit based on economies of scale with lower production costs. Another aspect that we need to consider is financial synergy, where you are lowering your financing costs because the companies are coming together and merging their resources. So that means they're also reducing their risk and their debt capacity and lowering their before tax cost of financing. The third one, and which is the most common parameter that we are all well aware of, is the managerial synergies. Here, people with different competencies come together, and human capital is diversified, and the companies are able to build empires. So, the advantages of merger and acquisition, or M&A, is that firms come together and merge their power and control. The second one is they allow for increased value efficiencies because of the new entity being larger than two halves. Then the economies of scale and sharing of resources and services. Then we are talking in terms of the competitive advantage because they are becoming better and bigger because different companies have come together and raised their buying power and production runs. There are also a noticeable decrease in the risk because of innovative techniques of managing financial risk and companies having to compete in the market. They have to have technological developments. The next advantage is tax benefits. While there are many advantages, there are also disadvantages. So the loss of experienced workers, the employees of the small merging firms may require exhaustive reskilling because they're not used to working in a larger production capacity or a bigger set of companies. Companies also face difficulties in terms of frictions and internal competitions between different employees of the united companies. Merging two firms are also having a disadvantage in terms of the duplication and over capability. So this is a broad outline in terms of this chapter and the kind of business firms that have the option that business firms have in going overseas or entering into international markets. They have sorry different modes of entry and three factors that we need to consider before entering into a foreign market: which market to enter, when to enter, and on what scale. So this is very important: which markets to enter, when to enter, on what scale. And the next one is the various market entry strategies in terms of direct exporting, direct investment, franchising, contract manufacturing, joint ventures, sorry, strategic alliances, mergers, and acquisitions. So this is about today's session. So we have been able to cover 2 units, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I'll be more than happy to answer. Sorry. Okay, so thank you so much, and enjoyed today's session, and look forward to catching up with all of you in the next session. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.